Thank you.
All right, so a way to dig this slide?
Yes, I'll take care of it.
Thanks. All right, so today I'm going to talk to you about a general overview of network signaling, which is personally one of my favorites. When I prepared this lecture, I have a few things in mind. So just to share with you. So why that? Of course, as every signaling, it's complicated, and well, I guess again, so this is one of my favorites. So I may have some bias. So this is one of the hot topic, very popular signaling in the past, I would say maybe 10, 20 years. And that's also, again, so one of my focus on, or the focus when I was in graduate school. So I really love this signaling. But again, so meanwhile, as every signaling, there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of original research papers on that. And within this 1 hour, 1.5 hour, of course, it's impossible for anyone to really go through all the details of this signaling. So that's number one. So really, it's an overview. However, instead of go through again, so all the components of the signaling, like A to B, B to C, C to D, like this, which of course I'm going to talk about all the key components. I really want to talk to you some of the interesting studies, especially those original studies, research articles, to pursue, to investigate the role of network signaling in physiology or pathology, or pathophysiology state, meaning that the functional aspects of this signaling in the context, again, so of physiology and the pathophysiology, which I think is very important. Again, so trying to ask what does the regulation or dysregulation of this signaling mean? So that's my second thoughts. The other things, of course, as you can almost tell from this picture, so this is a confocal image, dendritic staining of elongation factor 1A, which is one of the key components of network signaling. And this is done by a graduate student in my lab, Helena Zimmerman, a third-year neuroscience grad student. So, as I just said, that of course the signaling, including network signaling, is everywhere. So it's in every system, it's in multiple diseases. But for me, because of my background and because of, I assume that a lot of people here, either for the IPP program or neuroscience program, I have a bias towards the neuroscience. So meaning that in the context of, let's say, synaptic plasticity, learning, memory, and some neurological diseases. But again, so if you have any other question about other disease, we can definitely discuss and talk. What else I want to see? Right. So the disclaimer, of course, now this is kind of the lecture that given me and you the opportunity to improve the lecture, because this is really the first time I give this lecture to the graduate school, to the graduate students. Please, so if you have any concern, comments, let me know. You can email or just, of course, raise your hand in the class, so we can hopefully improve in the future lecture. All right. So with that, I'll just start. All right. So what is mTOR? First, the nomenclature, and that's really interesting too. So it's mammalian target of rapamycin. So that has been used forever. But in the recent, I think you probably read that in the review paper. So maybe one student read that in the Sabatini review. The official name now is the mechanistic target organizing. But again, so I think there's no problem. You still call it mimetic target organizing. In all the amateur story, again, all the great amateur stories, all these hundreds and thousand papers coming from this island, the starting point, which is Easter Island. In the native language, it's called the Rapa Nui, because that's how to pronounce it. This is an island in southern Pacific Ocean. I think it's close to Chile. It's very famous for its, I forgot what this is called, but this is kind of like a big stone, hat, which I think it's, at least in some reports, considered as one of the new seven wonders of the world. Now, so why this island is important for science? Well, of course, again, so I didn't know that until I dig in the literature to know about the amateur story. Because in this island, I think that the soil, so they isolated a antifungal components, which is microlide. Again, so this is antifungal microlide, and it's very potent. So it's endo. It's totally new. So they decided to name it, give it a name, and the name they give it is after the name of this native, the native name of this island, Rapa. So they call it rapamycin. So again, so initially people know nothing about this rapamycin connection to the TUR pathway, but with time, so you know that, as you can tell that that's how it's named. So after rapamycin, because this is the target of rapamycin. Of course, this is more complicated, much complicated, more complicated than what I just said. Later on, we're going to talk about. There's also the rapamycin insensitive components, which is called mTOR-C2, and mTOR we usually talk about is called mTOR-C1. But again, so don't worry. So we're going to talk about that in the later slide. So this is quoted from Sabatini's review. Of course, again, so this is Sabatini's favorite topic, and so who's in MIT, I believe. So his lab is really the lab that contributed to, I would say, most of the important findings in terms of the basic signaling components of mTOR. Of course, he's not a neuroscientist, I would say. So a lot of the neuroscience stuff I'm going to talk about later on is not from his lab. It's from other labs, including my own. So what Sabatini said here that I sometimes joke that mTOR regulates everything. Also, this is of course not true. It is remarkable how many major processes has to be control. And again, so here is just a brief introduction of what mTOR-C1 can. So you can almost just tell that here is already there's a C1 and a C2. So C stands for complex. There's mTOR complex 1, mTOR complex 2. Now, again, so we're going to talk that later. But the reason why they call C1, C2 is because they both have mTOR. They both have the TOR as the core components, and then with a whole bunch of other components that enable them to have a very distinct, very different function. And the other thing is that mTOR-C1, so when people talk about mTOR, usually they talk about mTOR-C1. So that's one thing you need to keep in mind. So people, sometimes go, oh, mTOR. So usually, and I would say 99% of the case, they actually talk about mTOR-C1, even though they probably don't realize that they talk about mTOR-C1. So that's number one. So that's totally fine. But meanwhile, you should keep in mind that the mTOR-C2 is type 2. So there are two complexes. And again, so they're different. So when you write a paper, or when you run the grounds these days, you definitely need to differentiate them. So you cannot just say mTOR. You have to say it's mTOR C1 or mTOR C2. So, all right. So you see that all this inputs. So all this stress and acid energy levels, and you see all these downstream factors or effects of mTOR. And obviously, as you can tell that this is important because as you can tell that this is important for the controlling metabolism, controls growth, cell cycle, autophagy, and the micromolecular biosynthesis, so including the lipids. And I'll give you an example of the growth. So if you, so I put actually in your, I believe in your textbook, in the signal transduction textbook, there's a picture of Drosophila, and they mutate one of the, I think it's PRC kinase, which is one of the upstream kinase for mTOR. So basically, the mutation caused the upregulation of mTOR C1 again, and you can appreciate that how the Drosophila, I believe it's the eye, so they enlarged and grows so much bigger. And here, the example I'm giving to you is a little bit advanced. It's in mammalian, it's in the mouse. So this is from Michael Haas group from Switzerland, Basel. So again, so his group is really again so one of the together with Sabatidis group is really one of the most important groups in the mTOR signaling. I remember, so I talked to him once in the conference, and later I saw that so he was interviewed, and what he was talking about that I think that's maybe about 10 years ago, something like that. So what he said that so these days, so we more frequently scooped by other groups. So meaning that their findings is first reported, the research done by other groups. So of course, he said that we're upset, we're unhappy about that. But meanwhile, so we feel happy in that this really becomes a very hot topic. So and again, so he's talking about mTOR C1. So what they did here is that they, so as you can tell here, so they knock out Raptor. Now what is Raptor? So don't worry, so we're going to talk about that later. Raptor is a key component of mTOR C1. So meaning that when you knock down the Raptor, so they did this knockdown, so knockout. When you knock down the Raptor, it's going to knock down the mTOR C1 activity. So just keep that in mind. And of course, as you can tell that here they did a tissue-specific knockout because you cannot do the global knockout. If you do the global knockout, it's lethal. It's embryonic lethal. And again, so that highlights how important this signaling pathway is. So again, so if you knock that out, it's going to be dead. So what they did is that they used this conditional knockout techniques. They knock out the mTOR C1 again, so through the Raptor in the adipose tissue specifically. And you can tell here that so there is a very dramatic phenotype associated with that. So as you can tell again, so look at this figure. So this is just fed mice with the regular chow, the regular diet. And you can tell that with time, of course, you would expect that the mouse, this is the flux, meaning the wild type. You can see the wild type mice, of course, gain weight. But meanwhile, so you can tell that the mutant mice, they gain weight too, but in a much. So there's the rate might be similar, but you can see that they're definitely much lower for the curve. And here they use the HI value, which is the high fat diet, which is like full of fat. And you can see that the wild type mouse gain weight rapidly, so you can make it fat. While for the mTOR C1 knockdown or knockout mouse, it's almost resistant resistant to this Hi-Fi DAT. And again, so this is the example of the mice. You can see the very dramatic. So you can tell, you can appreciate that this is wild type. After the, I believe this is after the Hi-Fi DAT, and this is the knockout. You see how thin the mouse is. Again, so this highlights the importance of this pathway in the growth and also in the metabolism. All right, so this is the outline of today's lecture. Mainly, I'm going to talk about the following topics. So again, most of the sickness stuff is going to be brief because if we go to every single detail, of course, it's not necessary. It's not going to be enough time. We can first talk about the structure of mTOR, and that is going to introduce the idea of the mTOR C1 and mTOR C2. Next, we can talk about the signaling. So basically, what's the downstream effectors of mTOR C1 and what's the upstream regulators of mTOR C1. Again, I'm going to highlight that in the mTOR 2 signaling that most of the knowledge, most of the sickness studies focus on the mTOR C1. But meanwhile, it doesn't mean that mTOR C2 is not important. So we're going to still talk about that, but very brief. And also, what does that mean in the physiology and pathophysiology? Finally, so in the last part of my talk, so I'm going to talk to you about the connection between, or the association, I would say, between mTOR signaling impairment of dysregulation and some of the diseases. Again, so as I said in the beginning, that we're going to talk, including in the signaling stuff, the downstream and effect. We're going to talk a lot in the context of the role of mTOR signaling in neuroscience. Right. So first, let's talk about mTOR and the. I think this is one of the reviews I sent you, right? I think I didn't present to you all the reviews, but I think this is one of the reviews from Chuck Hofer and Eric Lanzo. It's actually my postdoc mentor, so NYU. Just met him a couple days ago. So this is the structure of mTOR. Now again, so the point that so the reason again, so I don't want to go to all the details. Of course, you can read the review papers, you can read the articles to see all what does this mean. But I want to emphasize a few points. So the first point that pay attention to the FRB. Now, why this is important? Because a interesting and very important question, which has been studied for many years, that how rapamycin can inhibit mTOR C1. Right. So as I said in the very beginning, so mTOR is mammalian target of rapamycin. So obviously, rapamycin is very selective, potent, specific inhibitor of mTOR. But how did that happen? So again, so there are many studies, and I would say still not conclusive, friendly in terms of all the details. But at least something is for sure. So is that rapamycin does not interact or inhibit mTOR directly. So rapamycin again, so inhibits or repress the activity of mTOR indirectly. Through what? Through a, as I actually already wrote here, through this protein called FK506 binding protein, so called FKBP12, and this is how it works. So when the FKBP12 form the complex with rapamycin, so it somehow interact with the mTOR, with the TOR, and then inhibits again, so the activity of TOR. Now, and by the way, so there's a very nice paper by Hofer, by Chuck Hofer, in that they studied the knockdown, the knockout of FKBP12. I think it's a brain-specific FKBP12 in the brain, and study all this. If you want to check, you can just pop at that. It's a neuron paper, and again, so the interesting thing that this complex. So as I said that the TUR is the core components of both mTORC1 and mTORC2. But somehow this complex, this FKBP12 and the rapamycin complex, only inhibit TUR when the mTORC1 complex exists, but not when the mTORC2 complex exists. Again, so the same TUR is the same FKBP12, same rapamycin, but only works in mTORC1. So that's exactly another reason why it's called mTORC2, because it's very distinct from mTORC1. It does not respond to rapamycin. Yeah.
I'm sorry, so the FKBP12 does not bind to mTORC2 at all? Or it does complex, it just doesn't happen to interact with rapamycin at all on mTORC2?
FKBP12 interacts, so that's the binding domain, right, of
Yeah.
FKBP12. But FKBP12 connect or associate with the rapamycin.
Yeah, but does that connect at all to, so B12 associates with rapamycin
Right.
into mTORC1.
Right.
Without rapamycin, can the BP12 interact with mTORC2 at all, or no?
Without rapamycin,
Because it seems to be that that is integral to how rapamycin is working on mTORC1.
right.
They're as confused as
Probably not. Probably not. Probably, so again, so I didn't remember all the details, but you need the rapamycin to have the FKBP12 binding.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So you need the rapamycin. So you need to have that complex. So again, so my assumption again, so there must be some. Is that it must be something to do with the structure. So how that binding domain, for example, exposed to this complex. And again, so that also maybe one of the explanation why this works only in mTORC1, not mTORC2. Right? Sure. All right. So the other thing I want you to pay attention to is that, so highlight here the Raptor and Richter. So what is Raptor? So again, so it's a regulatory social protein receptor, and Richter is rapamycin receptor. Now, so why is that important? Remember I just said in the Michael Haas paper, is that they knocked down the Raptor, but I call it, not I, people call it mTORC1 knockdown. Why? Because that's how you differentiate mTORC1 and mTORC2, right? So, as I just said that, so both complexes, mTORC1 and mTORC2, they have the mTOR, they have the TOR as their core components, but they have different associated components. And one of the key components differentiation that, again, so in the mTORC1, it's Raptor. While in the mTORC2 is Richter. So sometimes we call mTORC1 mTOR Raptor, mTORC2 mTOR Richter. So that's sometimes people. But of course, as I'm going to show you in the next slides, it's not only that, but this is really the key components. And you can almost tell from the name, right? So because what is Richter, for example? Richter's, the I stands for, the R stands for rapamycin, and the I stands for insensitive. So obviously this is the key components of mTORC2. All right. So again, so let's move on. So this is the from the Sabatini's review that to tell you. So again, so as I said that I believe that most of this, so the components on mTORC1 and mTORC2, so all these components, so from Sabatini's studies, so every component is either a science paper or nature paper. So and we don't know whether there's going to be more. I remember that when I was in Europe, Sabatini gave a lecture, and so he said that at that time, so they just submitted that paper to Science about one of the components of mTOR. And then he especially showed one of the reviewer comments. He said that Sabatini group identified yet another components of mTORC1. So I guess the reviewers kind of like joking that so this is endless. So their groups keep identifying new components of mTOR. But it is true, and it is more complicated, more sophisticated than people originally thought. Meaning that it's not only the TOR, but also a lot of associated components that actually play important role of the complexes. Again, so as I just highlighted in the previous slides, so the TORC1 and TORC2. All right, so again, so I'm not going to go through all the details. So if you are interested, you can definitely read more. All right, so now, so let's move on to the signaling, or to the meaning the classical. When we talk about signaling, classical kind of like downstream and upstream. So that's first. Let's start with the downstream. All right, so this is the cartoon that I drew actually from my thesis. So some of the nomenclature here, some terms here actually needs to be updated, and I'm going to talk about that later. I think it's 1 or 2, yeah. But in any case, so this, I think everything here is still true, both true. So that's good, and that's also highlights, I would say, all the key components of the mTOR signaling. So I always tell people, so of course I know this is a lecture for the students, but even when I give the seminars, for example, I always tell people that, so for the non-signaling people, of course, so when I look at this, kind of like cartoon, they always say that, oh gosh, so there are too many errors, and so it's so sophisticated, this and that. But I always say that this is, no matter how sophisticated it is when you see a cartoon signaling, so it's always oversimplified, right? So because in the real world, it's much more sophisticated than this. So even for this one, I would say obviously they skip quite a few components. But again, so as I said that, I think for this lecture, for the kind of like overview, introduction of mTOR signaling, this is quite enough. Now, again, so this is as you can tell, this is a complicated signal pathway. So I'm glad that, so as I said, that so we don't have much time, but still, so I'm glad that I finally have some time to go through the signaling, like in the quite details. But usually when I give the seminars, I only have like about maybe 1 or 2 minutes to go over the whole signaling. So I have to rush, and I don't think anybody, except for those people who work in the signaling, can really follow me. But now I can really, again, so take the time. All right, so where shall we start? As I said, we're talking about the downstream, okay? So there are many downstream effects, as I showed in the first slide. But meanwhile, so the one that I want to highlight here is that the de novo processing, or MR translation. So mTOR, again, so here we talk about, you can see that I highlight mTOR. mTOR controls protein synthesis, MR translation, which clearly is very important, right? Now, so how mTOR controls protein synthesis? So again, so as you can tell here that I put a rough here, so you can almost tell this is mTOR C1. Now, mTOR controls protein synthesis through 2 downstream well-established, or still the most well-established downstream targets. One is called P7-6 kinase, the other is called 4-BP. All right. So what is P7? So P7 kinase, by the way, so now the official name is called S6K1. And obviously there's S6K2, right? And why is P called P7? Because its molecular weight is 70. Sorry. Well, the other one, S6K2, is used to call P85 because the molecular weight is 85. All right. So that's why I still like this name instead of S6K1. But again, so the official name I believe now is called S6K1. So by the way, so this is like a lot of other things, like if you do the neuroscience, if you do the MR receptor, like used to be R1 receptor 1, which I think makes a lot of sense, but now you have to call it A1, right? A1, A2. So again, so P7 kinase. So obviously, if it's I6 kinase, it must be the functions must be. So kinase function is what? Now to phosphorate, right? To phosphorate what? I6, right? Because it's called I6 kinase. So obviously, that phosphorate I6. Now, what is I6? I6 is a ribosome protein. So I actually put here ribosome protein I6. That's how it's being originally identified. They found that this kinase has a function to phosphorate the components of the ribosome I6. Now, later on, they found that not only I6, but also the P76 kinase, or let's say this branch of mTOR pathway, control the clean synthesis of a lot of proteins. So including, I just mentioned, and in the very beginning, in the first slide, the statement of my students, EF1A. So E stands for eukaryotic, and the capital E stands for the elongation factor 1A. And there's also the elongation factor 2, and there's also the PABP poly A binding protein. So and there's one interesting thing about this. So meaning that what they have in common. There are a couple things in common. One is that they all call the top mRNAs. So there are meaning the mRNAs encoding this proteins. So what's top? So it's a terminal oligopyrimidine. So in their 5', they all have this very signature terminal oligopyrimidine. So that's number one. Number two, as I actually state here, so the protein synthesis here, a lot of them actually belongs to the translational machinery or apparatus. As you can almost tell, right? Of course, the elongated factor and the ribosome protein. So what does that mean again? So this is kind of like a little bit further detail. So, but I can tell you that, so if you imagine, let's say, this is probably a smart way, a very smart way of the cell control the energy metabolism and protein synthesis. Why? Because, so analogy would be that, so if you have all the machineries there, that use this, it's going to be kind of like a waste. But the proteins, I mean the cells are smart enough that they can sense the need to synthesize new proteins. And those proteins could be let's say a synaptic statistics, that's PS95, all the SSNMD receptors. But before that, they could first boost the protein synthesis capacity, ability, by boosting the protein synthesis of the machinery itself. So I'm not sure whether you get the whole idea. So this is called one of the series called like two waves. So first you build the machinery, and secondly you have the specific proteins you can synthesize. All right, so that's P76 kinase branch. Now the other branch, as you can tell, that is called 4-EBP. So what is 4-EBP? So 4-EBP, so it's 4E binding protein. Now what is 4E? 4E is EIF4E. So this is EIF4E binding. So what is EIF4E? So again, so the small e eukaryotic. And the capital E, initiation. Again, so compared to this elongation, this is initiation. Factor 4E. All right? So again, so this, obviously this is, I can actually already put here. So this is important for the protein synthesis initiation. So as we all know, probably from high school, I guess, the protein synthesis includes how many phases? How many phases? No, the protein synthesis, not the center. I'm not asking the center document. So the protein synthesis, the MR translation itself.
Oh, 4.
Yeah, what for?
Primary, secondary. It's like
In general.
Yeah.
In general. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I was thinking 3, but there's some that say 4. So classical is 3, right? So first initiation, and then elongation, and of course indetermination. You cannot let the persons going on forever, right? So So 3. And again, so for each steps, you're going to need important factors. So like for the initiation steps, of course, this is initiation, translation factor for initiation. And for the elongation step, of course, all this the 1A, that's the elongation. All right. So let's go back to this a little bit. So as you can tell from the arrow, so what mTOR-C, so again, so mTOR itself is a kinase. So keep it on that. So itself, it's, the function is to phosphorylate. So obviously it's phosphorylate both P76 kinase and 4BP. Now, when the phosphorylate P76 kinase is going to boost, activate its activity. All right, so this leads to all this translation. Now, when it's phosphorylated 4BP is actually going to inhibit the activity of 4BP. Now, but in the end, it's going to boost peroxisome. Why? Because the 4BP itself is a binding protein for EF4E, which is an inhibition of 4E to participate in the translation. So do you get that? So because of inhibition of 4BP, so it's kind of liberate the 4E to participate in the translation, which it involves part of the big complex or EF4 complex. All right, again, so I know, and this is kind of like complicated again, so this is many studies. But let's move on to the next slide, which is probably easier for you to understand. All right, so this is what I draw. So again, so of course it's oversimplified about the downstream. So let's just go over this again. So mTORC1, so it's active at 6 kinase 1, used to be called P76 kinase, and that leads to the S6 phosphorylation and also the synthesis of 6, along with other top proteins. So that's one branch. And on the other side, so it's inhibit the 4BP, the EF4E binding protein, release the EF4E, which, as I said, the components of 4F complex includes 4E, 4G, 4A, and 4B. So what is the function of all these components? If you're interested, you can go to, for example, the G, is the scaffolding protein, and A is the helicase. How is M1 the mRNA? So, but again, so I'm not going to talk to you about all the detail, but you need to remember at least that the inhibition or the phosphorylation of 4BP by mTOR is promoting translation synthesis through EF4E. Right? Okay. And the other thing I want to, this is actually one of the main projects going on in the lab, is about the EF2K. So which, as I said, I didn't include that in the previous slide. So mTORC1 basically inhibited EF2 kinase, which again, so obviously it's a kinase for EF2. So what is EF2? So it's the elongation factor 2, right? So, and that phosphorylation of EF2 leads to the, as I prompted here, disrupt the peptide elongation and the protein synthesis. So which means that when mTORC1 is activated, it's going to, what's going to happen to the EF2? What's that? It's going to increase the phosphorylation of EF2 or decrease.
Decrease the phosphorylation of
Yeah.
EF.
Obviously decrease because it's inhibiting the EF2K, right, of course, which, which
Increases protein synthesis.
exactly, because as I just said, the phosphorylation EF2 inhibit the protein synthesis. So now you have a dephosphorylation of EF2, so it's going to promote protein synthesis, right? So as you can tell that, again, so back to the starting point, I said that mTOR controls the protein synthesis really through multiple ways. Here you already see the three. Okay, so that's just one. All right, so here I'm going to show you some of the functional studies. Now, this is actually from my PhD lab. So again, so it's a little bit awkward to show all this study of either my own or from my the connections. Yeah. But I think they're all good studies. So let's say one of the most intensely studied role of mTOR is that in the neuronal function. Here, let's say in the so-called plasticity and the memory. And this is one of the most straightforward studies. You just put rapamycin, right? So again, so rapamycin blocks mTOR. So this is the LTP study, as you probably already know. So of course, this is a standard model for learning memory. And here, so this is, again, so on a hippocampal slices from a rat. So when you give a stimulation called HFS, high frequency stimulation, you could induce this, so this is the wild type induce this long-term potentiation, which again, so considered as a model of cellular explanation for learning memory. Now, what happened when you apply the rapamycin? So let's just look at this part. So the high dose, when they use the 1 micromolar, so this one, right? So when they use the 1 micromolar, so you can see that the HFS now failed to induce RTP, right? So again, so there's studies which I'm not going to show here. So mainly by hamsters group show that when you infuse rapamycin into the brain of let's say a mouse or rat, the memory formation estimated by either free conditioning or other memory test is going to be inhibited, right? And here just to show you the some Western data that so again, so when you have HFS, high frequency stimulation, which induce RTP, which again, so you can just consider as induce memory. So if you not very familiar with electrical physiology, so you can see that all these M2 components, so which is P76 kinase. So by the way, so this is a phosphorylation of P76 kinase, right? As I said that M2 itself is a kinase that phosphorylates I6-1 or P76 kinase. And there's multiple sites in the P76 kinase. And so here they use the site 389, which is second to last site, which is the indicator of the P76 kinase activity, and which is a indicator of M2. And the other ones, you have one, as I said many times, right? So you can see that they all increase, right? And the point that when you use rapamycin is all in the blocks. Okay. So this is from Costa Mayonis group in Baylor. So here they call this, they have a fancy name, but it's very easy to understand. They call it pharmacogenetic, but it's, again, so it's very easy to understand. So as I said that if you knock down the mTOR, so homozygous, it's not going to work because it's embryonic lethal. It's not going to anything, right? So if you want to study the whole animal, so you have to do a either specific or the head knockout. Actually, if you even do, so later on we'll talk about some of the components. If you even do like brain specific knockout, it's going to be so too. So I guess probably the brain development is also key for the whole development, so for the whole body. So in any case, so here they use a let's see, let's see. So it's labeled here. So here they use a heterogeneous protein knockout. So of the mTORC1. And what they found is that trying to organize it here. So what they found here is that so I believe so. Yeah, this is wild type. So if they use a software called very low dose rapamycin, so here's a 10 nanomolar. So as you can almost tell from the previous one, it's even lower than the low dose they use here. So it is 1 nanomolar, right? So if they use a 10 nanomolar, it's going to be doing nothing against for the wild type. But if you use the same 10 nanomolar on top of the mTOR knockdown, I would say not knockdown, right? Knockdown mice, you see? So the RTP actually failed. So again, so this is the genetic manipulation. So the pharmacological manipulation on top of the genetic, right? And here's the behavior. I believe here, because the phrasing believe is a free conditioning. So as you can tell that, so after 24 hours, so this is again, so I'm not sure how you're familiar with this behavior. So usually, so again, so we put the mice there, give them a shock, right? So and then later on, they're going to remember this good shock. So let's say, so of course that's associated with some of the cues, either the audio tones or there's environment. So next time after 24 hours, actually even longer than that, when you put the mouse back to the same chamber, they're going to remember for the wild type. They're going to remember, oh gosh, this place is where I got shocked. So as soon as they enter there, they're going to freeze. So meaning that they remember that. So as you can tell here that for all this wild type and the wild type was rapamycin, all the mTOR, so the first three bars, the mTOR knockdown with the vehicle, they're all fine. So meaning that they freeze, frequently. So they remember. They do remember. They do remember the context or the toe or again, so that chamber, but not when you infuse rapamycin to this knockdown mice. So you see, the freezing rate is much lower. They almost lost their memory. All right. So that's all right. So I see that this is correct. A little bit, yeah. Okay, but again, so I think we already talked about really the key components of the mTOR. So this part again is a functional one, so we can just rush a little bit. So here I'm going to talk about upstream regulation, so which is already highlighted in the in the mycesis cutoff. But let me move on to some details, because in that cutoff it's really just tell you all these components. But let me just go to some details. So I love this review paper, which I would suggest you also read. So the good thing about this is very short. It's actually not even a review. It's called preview. It's comments on one of the papers published in the same issue of Cell. I think 2006 by Kundan Westby. But turns out this is very nice review, and turns out it's still true now. So which again, so it's very nice. So let's say. One of the things to understand, as you probably learn from the, sorry, I need to go back to the cartoon page. Here, I actually already highlight here. One of the key upstream regulator of mTOR is TSC2. Okay, so TSC2. Now, so first of all, you need to understand how TSC2 inhibit mTOR. So as I just said, TSC2 obviously is a negative regulator of mTORC1, right? How? So again, so just to see right here. So basically, TSC2 inhibits RAP. So what is RAP? Is RAS homolog nucleotide. You probably already know RAS. So it's like a G protein, right? Small G protein. So this is the GDPs that activate mTORC1. Okay, so that's simple, right? So if RAP, the RAS is a homolog inhibition rate, that activates mTORC1. And if TSC2 inhibit RAP, so when TSC2 activates, it's going to inhibit mTORC1, right? So that's obvious. Now, again, so this is important because it turns out, at least based on the this studies and of course many other studies, that TSC2 turns out probably the most established and the most important upstream regulator of mTOR. And it turns out that a lot of it's kind of like a nexus to incorporate a lot of other signaling to influence mTOR, as again so nicely illustrated here. So let's say, and you probably already know some of this. Let's say, what are the other signaling? Okay, so from here you have the ERK, you have AKT, you have GISC. So again, so I'm pretty sure you're already familiar with this name. This is all big names in the signaling. You have AMPK, you have AKT, you have risk of the ribosome protein kinase. Now, what you need to pay attention to that. So look at the. In some cases, it's error, right? In some cases, it's blocking error, which means it's inhibition. If it's error, of course, it's meaning activation. All right. So again, so it's very extensive then. But let me just ask you. So for example, let me just random pick up one. So let's say for AKT again. So we're probably familiar with that. So for AKT, so what does it do? So when it's activated, right? What does it do mTOR? It's up or down?
Down.
Yeah. Is that right? No. Sorry, I misleading you. So why? Because AKT inhibit the TSC2, right? Which means mTOR. I was asking mTOR, right? Which means mTOR is going to be up because TSC2 is negative mTOR, right? All right, so that becomes easier. Let me ask you another one. So what about when AMPK is activated? mTOR signaling is going to be down or up?
Yeah.
It's activated.
So AMPK activates TSC2, which blocks mTOR. So
Yep.
it blocks or activates the blocker.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So that, again, so of course this is straightforward, but let's say, so because this is, by the way, this is a lot of pharmacological thing here. So because, for example, there's a lot of AMPK inhibitor which have been used. So if you apply an AMPK inhibitor, the mTOR signal will be up. Yeah. Okay, good. So so again, so I actually put here, right? So obviously, so for all these negative representations of TSC2, so let's say there's ERK, there's AKT, there are different sites, but they're both negative. There's an ARSC. So when they are activated, it's going to be they are the positive regulators, right? Because again, so negative regulator of TSC2. So vice versa for those positive regulators of TSC2, including GSK3, AMPK. So they are the negative regulator actors, meaning that when they activate, the mTOR signal is going to be down. Okay, so if you remember this slide, so you're probably going to be okay for this lecture, if there's any exam associated with that. All right, so let's give another kind of like a functional example. So this is a study from Alcido Silva's group in UCLA. So here they use a TSC2 heterozygous knockout mouse. So as I probably said that if you use the hormone, it's not going to work. It's going to be different. Now, but still, so we have that mice too in the lab. So still, if you knock down TSC2 as I just said, so the mTOR signal is going to be up, right? Because TSC2 is a negative regulator, right? So even if it's knocked down. Now, so I showed this data because I want to highlight. So this is the concept. It takes me probably I don't know like 10 years to learn. So it's for any signal, I'm probably not saying for any signal, it's the homeostasis that is important. Right? Because sometimes when you study one signal, you can't like brainwash. You feel like okay, so when it's up, it's going to be good. When it's down, it's going to be bad. Right? No, it's the homeostasis. Meaning that for mTOR signaling, either up or down is not good. Actually, so by the way, so I can just tell you a interesting topic because, for example, my lab is working on Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative disease, including the degenerative memory deficit. Now, in our study, a lot of the neurodegenerative disease, so including Alzheimer's, so the mTOR signaling is down. As you can probably tell that the proteolysis is down, which is not good. But meanwhile, so remember that mTOR signaling is up in cancer. So actually, a lot of the original studies from cancer. So again, so either up or down, no good. So that's the concept I want you to really remember, keep in mind. Again, so that takes me many, many years to realize that. So now we all call dysregulation. So this highlights what mTOR signaling is up. It's no good. Why? Because you can see that. So here they use the percent time spent in the culture. So this is a Morris Watermaze test, as you probably know. So what is this? So you have a pool of water. So you have the mouse swim to find a hidden platform, and later on, so in either the 5th days or it depends on the protocol, you remove that hidden platform, and you still put the mouse there, let it run for like a swim for like 1 minute, and you can imagine that for a regular smart wild-type mouse, it's going to spend a lot of time in the so-called target colony, right? Which is where the hidden platform was, which is this, right? Which is this black ball. Again, so you can see that wild-type spend most of the time here, but for the TSC2, it's actually their memory is impaired, so it's actually down. Well, not exactly down to the levels of other, they still remember something, but obviously not as good as wild-type. And here, just highlight that, of course, one of the obvious thing in the cancer biology, in the cell studies that, as I said, that it's already known. But meaning that the TSC2 is an upstream negative reactor of mTOR. But whether this is true in neuroscience, so they did this elegant experiment. They kind of like also painful. They injected rapamycin to reverse this phenotype, and you see that it's did you see the black bar? So it's clearly it's rescue, right? So either by 5 mg per the high dose or the low dose, right? Yeah, go ahead.
How does this cognitive impairment of mTORC1 hyperactivity compare with the previous slide that you have of mTORC1 inhibition with the knockdown model? Is it the same type of cognitive defects? A different type of cognitive defect? Like your very early slides.
That's the yeah, I know. So that's the exactly opposite, right? So that in that one you knock down the mTORC1, right? You knock down the mTOR. Well, here so meaning that the mTOR signal is down, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we talked about this one, right? Right. So this
Yeah.
mTOR, yeah. So in this one, the mTORC signal is down because you knock down the mTOR itself, including the raptor signal, right? In the very first slide. This one, right?
Yep.
But meanwhile, so what I just said that so in this Silva study, so they knocked down the TSC2, which is negative regulator of mTORC1, so which bring the mTORC1 up. So it's exactly opposite, right?
Well, molecularly, yes, but phenotypically.
Oh, I see. So yeah, so first of all, again, so that's exactly what I said that you need the homeostasis, right? So either up or down, they both impair their memory and learning. Phenotypically, let's say here, so their memory is impaired, right? So of course they use a different paradigm. So here they use the free conditioning. The other one I just showed is here they use the Morse water rate, so it's different. But whether here they use the free conditioning, I believe they use 2. I think they use a 3 type of behavior test. That's how you can publish data. So by the way, so you need to do multiple approaches. And so I think that's impaired too. So in that sense, it's kind of like a similar phenotype, right? So in the behavioral. In terms of the electrophysiology, LTP is sophisticated. It's sophisticated. In that PS paper, so that's pretty straightforward, right? Just down, right? So when you put the rapamycin there, it's just down. When you either in the knockdown or just the rapamycin. But in that TSC2 mice, for example, if I remember right, it's not that fact. It's that their early LTP is actually be converted into a late LTP. Now that's kind of like a terminology not that familiar with. But I guess the short message that in terms of electrophysiology, not exactly the same. And there are many other studies on that. And why is that? There's many explanations, but we don't have time to go through all the details. All right. So here's another studies to talk about the upstream regulator, so the functioning. So as I highlight here, so this time we count ERK, because again, so you're probably familiar with the ERK is basically MAPK, right? So MAPK is in the brain, so that's called ERK. Now, so as I just said that, so ERK obviously is a negative regulator of TSC2, which is positive regulator of mTOR, right? So meaning that when you inhibit the ERK, so the mTOR signaling is going to be down, right? Because it's obviously it's positive regulator of TSC1 because negative regulator of TSC2. Now, so I just want to highlight a few experiments here. So, for example, if you, so this is HFS against RTB representation. If you give HFS, you're going to have the upregulation of mTOR. So again, so here estimated by the elongation factor or the ribosome. Now, if you apply the PD or U0126, which are both ERK inhibitors, now you block the mTOR signaling. So that is consistent with your said, right? So with what just said about what about ERK is positive inhibitor, it's a positive regulator of mTOR. Now, by the way, so there's one thing that you might be interested. If you already know this, why you want to test this? Well, so that's exactly the point. So, as I just mentioned that a lot of, well, most of the things I would say, initially studied in the non-neuronal system, in the cell coverage system, or let's say in the cancer cell line. So, which is very nice. Does not necessarily mean that they are true in the neurons, in the whole, tissue animal body. So that's why you want to be really careful. So in the future, so when you, for example, when you do your thesis talk or you qualify exam, you bring a cartoon, you show to your committee, you show, okay, so this is A to B, B to C. So, and then you need to know that may not be necessarily exactly true in the system that you're studying. You got it? So that's the point, right? All right. So, and correlated to that, you can see that the FTP study, either when you put the P compound or the U compound, they all block FTP, which again is kind of like similar to the Rapamycin study, right? Let's just move on, because I want to leave maybe a few minutes we can ask more questions. All right. So what about AMPK? So as we highlight here, so So here we're talking GSK about MPK, because again, so sorry that the title is wrong. So because MPK is the kind of like the main topic in my lab. So yeah. So actually here's about GSK3. So again, so GSK3 here is a positive regulator of TSC2. So it's a negative regulator of mTOR. Now, when you inhibit GSK3, it's going to upregulate mTOR, right? All right. So let's see whether that's happened. What happens? So if you apply the lithium or component with both mTOR, with both GSK3 inhibitor. Of course, lithium is more kind of like a general, right? As you can probably tell, it's kind of like a dirty drug, but it's very commonly used in clinical, right? So like the bipolar mood, right, disorder. Now, so that's why we use component, another structure different but more specific inhibitor of GSK3. But in any case, as you can tell that, so when you have the lithium, so you're going to have the upregulation of mTOR signaling, as here estimated by either the phosphorylation of S61 kinase or the EFA. And that to make sure this is really something to do with the mTOR. So if you apply the rapamycin, this has been all blocked. Okay, so that's number one. And what about the functional? So here's some FTP study. So again, so this is a little bit more sophisticated. If you're interested, you can go to the paper. So this is one of my best papers. So, but let's say, so if you apply the lithium, so look at here, and if you give HFS, now here is a weak HFS. Usually it uses a kind of decline TP. The RT actually being rescued. So it's converted into a long MTP, right? And this is sensitive to rapamycin because if you put sensitive to the mTOR signal because if you put the rapamycin, it's going to be down. All right. Yeah, so let's just go together. Okay, so for mTOR2, it's going to be very brief. You probably only need to remember those two points. So one is that compared to mTOR1, very little is known about mTOR2. So that's number one. Okay. So again, so that's why people talk about mTOR. Usually they talk about mTOR1. That's the default. Number one. Number two, that so this is very, as I would say, very nice scientific story. So you probably can tell from this cartoon that one of the, and as I actually talked about a few times, one of the most important upstream regulator mTOR is AKT. Again, so you probably know this. It's also called PKB, right? Now, there's a kinases for AKT. So for a long time, people know that there's a PDK kinase. That's the upstream kinase for AKT. And that's phosphorylated at 308 site. But later on, they found another kinase for AKT. Now, that's phosphorylated not on 308, but on 4 73. But interestingly, they found that components has a lot of different properties as compared to PDK, the regular PDK. But they just don't know what is that. So in the end, they have to name it as PDK2 because again, so it definitely kind of like PDK because it's phosphor AKT. That's how it's got named. But it's not as the classical PDK, so they call it PDK2. So the other one has to be called PDK1. So in the many, many years later, so they found mTORC2, M2 Richter. And turns out the mTORC2 and PDK2 is the same thing. So the mTORC2 is the long sought PDK2. Okay, so that's the short story. And again, so that's probably the most important finding in terms of the basic science, in terms of signaling regarding mTORC2. So they kind of like solve the puzzle. So this is PDK2. So that's phosphorylated AKT on another site called 473. That's why the phosphorylation of 473 is a readout for mTORC2 activity. All right. So that's why when you look at the literature, if they talk about mTORC2, almost for sure they're going to check the phosphorylation of AKT, but not on 308 side, but on the 473 side, because that's how PDK2 or mTORC2 phosphorylate. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Of course, this is a very recent study again, so from I think it's published last year in Nature Neuroscience by Castiglioni's group, talking about what about if you knock down mTORC2. So here, as you can tell that they knock down the Richter, but they call it mTORC2. Why? Because at the beginning we said that Richter is the essential component of mTORC2. So mTOR Raptor, mTORC1, mTOR Richter, mTORC2. So now you knock down Richter again. So you knock down mTORC2. So what is FB here mean? It's a form specific knockout because again, so that is way to study the brain function. So just a very brief. So here, of course, they did electrophysiology to check the RTP. They also did a behavior test to check learning memory. Now, what about the electrophysiology? So this is some Western cat out. So you see that again. So they actually checked for 73 side of the AKT. Now, what happened that if they use the full train HFS, which is a particle-induced long-term potential, it's a late form of long-term potential, you can see that in the control, of course, you have no problem. You have nice RTP. Now, in the Richter knockout, again, so in the mTORC2 knockout, which is a open circuit, you can see that RTP fill. Okay, so mTORC2 does contribute to plasticity. What about the learning memory? So again, so here's just the classical water maze. So usually you should see a curve like this because this is the latency, meaning that the time it takes the mouse to fed the platform. Okay, and this is the axis is day. So you can tell that with days, with time, the mouse is going to fed the platform faster. Why? Because you let them associate it with the rescue. As soon as the mouse fed the platform, you rescue them and put them in home game. So soon they associate that. Like, okay, so I don't want to swim in this cold, water and energy consuming. I want to be in my warm, cozy, home cave. So family, I mean, sooner or later they learn that. So the next time when you put them in the water, they're gonna fan the platform faster. So that's why you see the platform is again. So the escape latency is shorter and shorter, right? But that's not what happened in the knockout mice. That first you see that pretty down, right? So with time, even like 5th days, it's still like almost similar to the first day. So their memory clearly impaired. And here again, so the similar idea that as I just said that this is called occupancy, right? So probe trials after 5 days. So you can see that for the control, of course, spent both of the entire control, while in the for the Richter knockout, no, right?
And the Richter knockout is then inhibiting mTORC2. So blocking of mTORC2 increases memory. Is that true? Or?
In the Richter knockout, so this is Richter knockout, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's directly the mTORC2, right?
Okay.
Yeah. That's again. So that's the way to knock out mTOR, because it's the same mTOR. You cannot do mTOR, right? If you do mTOR, you're not going to differentiate the mTOR C1 mTOR C2. So it has to be regular. Okay. Okay. So we now go to the last, which I think for me personally, I think is the most interesting. And this is actually what we have been doing, meaning the translation study. What are the main in the disease? Here I'm just quickly talk about two diseases. One is called Fragile X. Have you heard about Fragile X? It's like I think the second most common mental retardation, right? So in any case, so this is from two studies. One is from Zukin's group from Albert Einstein in New York. The other is from actually Eric Klein's group. So here, so the first two paragraphs, they show that in the FM knockout mouse, which is a mouse model for Fragile X. You can see that what happens is that there's a upregulation of mTOR. So you see, estimated by phospho-mTOR in the KO, there's nothing for the total, right? But the phospho, and also estimated by phospho-S6 kinase. So I believe here's S6K1 because you see the molecular weight, right? So and also by the right. So there's an upregulation. Now that upregulation also corresponds to a upregulation of protein synthesis. You see the FMRI. So this is a protein assay to detect the protein synthesis called Sensei. I'm not going to go into detail, but you see that there's an increase of protein synthesis in Fragile X model. And so this is the Aditi Bhattacharya's study. What Aditi did that, so she was a postdoc in Eric's lab, is that generate is a double bit mass, so meaning cross the Fragile X with the S6 knockout mass. So what's that? So what's the rationale there? What's the rationale there? So by the way, so I forgot one of the points in the very beginning. Another point I really like to want you to appreciate that in this kind of lecture, again, so when I give lecture to the grad student, that I hope because for all this knowledge, you can always read in the review on the paper, or sometime you're gonna forget probably after the exam. But meanwhile, so I not only infuse you with the knowledge, but also I want to appreciate some of the way that the scientists are doing their research, because that's what you're doing, right? So the way they do research, the logic they approach a question. So I think that's also very important. For example, here, so why they did this? Because based on what you just said, because if you have a significant increase of mTOR signaling pathway associated with the protein synthesis in this disease, Fragile X, if you hypothesis, let's say, this is probably one of the reasons, besides the genetic mutation, this is probably one of the mechanisms that cause the pathophysiology, cause their mental retardation, cause their memory, deficits. Then, if you somehow rescue this upregulation, you can to rescue the memory deficit, right? So that's why they want to generate this dominance. So why? Because how they generate dominance, they cross the Fragile X mice with S6 knockout mice, right? See here, the S6 knockout mice. What the S6 knockout mice? S6, well, we just said that it's one of downstream target of mTOR. So if you knock down the S6, you get to knock down the mTOR C1, right? So the whole mTOR signaling is done. And again, so on the other hand, you have the up of mTOR signaling in the Fragile X. So if I bring that down, so you bring this mTOR signaling to its homeostasis. And let's see what happened. And nicely here, again, so this is the behavior test that show you so this is just the weapon. So to demonstrate that it is down back to homeostasis. But the important thing is the next one. So this is the function study. So this is the RTD study. So again, so this is kind of the opposite from FTP. So when you have the a chemical state here, DHPG. So you see the compared to the wild type. Let's see where's the wild type. So I believe this is the wild type. Yeah? The Fragile X has a enhanced RTD. Now, when you do this double mutant, so DKO means double mutant knockout. So you see this. This one, this I think a green circle. So that back to the normal, back to the wild type. Right? So that's called rescue. And same here for the null object. So you probably know this, but let me just highlight a bit. So, so brief that. So the first day you have like two exactly the same object and not interact with each object. The second day you replace one of the similar object with a null object, and somehow usually the mouse like to interact with a new object. So that's what happened to the wild type, right? So you see the null object. But that's called memory, because obviously you recognize which is new, which is not, right? But that's not what happened in the Frederick X. You see they almost the same, so they're memory paired. But in the double Newton, you see that nicely recovered. And here is an even more interesting study. So this, again, so I don't have time to go through this, but this is called Y-maze. But what the point here, of course, you have like a Y-shaped maze like this, right? So on one of the arm you have, so you put the mouse here, and on one of the arms there's a platform. On the other there's no platform. So you can imagine that the mouse, of course, like to swing to the branch with the arm with the platform, right? Then it's going to be rescued. Now, but that's a very easy test, right? Because it's just the left and right, so just the two choices. But that's again, so not exactly the point of this test, because you see that in the learning phase, there's actually nothing happening. So for whichever mice, they're fine, they're okay. They know that to choose the arm with the platform. But what happens is that this day, so in the reversal, meaning that when they learn how to go, so after like one day, they definitely know, okay, so I need to go to the left, or I need to go to the right. So then you play a trick. You put the platform from one side to the other side. You move that, right? So of course now the mouse still remember that, okay, so it's not the left, but it's actually moved to the right. So initially it still swim to the left. But after a few, there's a punishment that, so they learn, oh no, it's actually been changed. So now I need to, to the right. So that's called flexibility, right? So we all have that, right? So, there's always things changed. You need to learn. So it's always in this rule for this lecture, but somehow it's been changed to another rule. So you need to learn that. You saw this rule, but another rule. Now, somehow the Frederick experiment does not learn that. So they lost that flexibility. They keep going to that no matter what, even though they know. So that's called also kind of like a phenotype compared to the OCD or the perseveration, right? So for those people who are perseverative, so for example, they keep washing their hands but keep locking the door, so they know that they shouldn't do that. They know that the door is locked. They know that they wash their hands, but they still cannot control themselves. They still want to go back to wash their hands. They still want to control back to lock the door. They check whether the door is locked, right? So that's perseveration. So here is that is one of the phenotype of Frederick X. And again, so that's the nice rescue double. All right. So this is last slide. So I want to talk about it again. So that's actually my favorite topic, of course, but I just have like maybe 1 minute to talk about. So this is from the study from the first one. So it's one of the graduate student lab, Brenda Beckerman, recently published. So what we found here, so again, so just to give you a few highlights. So this is down on the human tissue, postmodern human tissue, of course, right? So if you look at the Alzheimer's patient, so their EF1A level is way down compared to the age-matched control. Again, so if you remember, EF1 is one of the components of the mTOR pathway, control PSP7 kinase pathway, right? And this is some immuno studies. So look at the fixed slice of brain, you can see that really the neuronal expression of EF1A. So again, so in the 80s, really down. Now, what we further did here that we used the TSC to knock down mice. Again, so it's the same TSC2 as you remember that. So we knocked down TSC2, mTOR is going up. So the idea, of course, that if you have the mTOR down, if that explain the deficit, then if you bring that up, that probably get to rescue, right? So there's an increase of the TSC2. That's actually, I believe, this particular thing is done by another graduate student from IPP program, Steve Day. I think it's the TA, right? It's the TA, right? Okay. I just realized that. Yeah. so there's actually up, right? There's a up of the F1. And so here is a simple experiment that if you apply the A beta, again, so which is core components of the plaques of the Alzheimer's, so the LTP actually down, right? So, but if you apply A beta on slices derived from this TSP knockdown mice, again, so which the EF1A is up, you actually improve the LTP, or we can see rescue LTP. So that's again so highlighted the importance of Alzheimer's disease and perception. All right, so this is the same slide as of course the Alzheimer's slide, but I just want you, so as the very last slide, I just want you to kind of like remember, so like go back to what we talked about today. Again, so you're probably not going to remember everything, and probably going to forget a lot of things after the exam. But I want you to still, if you whenever you see this, I want you to, again, so to appreciate a few points I emphasized in the lecture. That first of all, you need to know some of the key structures of mTOR, right? So, and key components, key idea of mTOR. So for example, next time when people talk to you mTOR, you can ask them, is this mTOR C1, mTOR C2? So that sounds very expert. So people go to, ooh, wow, mTOR, huh? so that's for example, one point. And the other thing I want to again remember that this is not only a kind of like dry signaling. It has life. It has its meaning in real life, in physiology, and of course pathophysiology. And I show you a lot of studies again. So not going to remember the study, but I want you to kind of like keep in mind that when you, for example, design experiments, so you have an idea that how the way to approach an experiment, approach this experiment design, and how to, for example, check your favorite signaling, not necessarily mTOR, of course, your signaling. So the whole concept, the whole idea of the experiment design. All right, so I think I think that's it. Yeah. Right. So if you have any, that's good time here. Is there any question?
Good question.
Yeah.
Is there an upregulation of the mTOR C1 or I guess the C2 in like drug dependence and craving because it has such a big role in memory?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I personally didn't remember, but there's definitely some dysregulation for sure. But in terms of what kind of dysregulation, there again, so there definitely, for example, you can check. I know definitely Eric Nesler's group. They have some studies about the mTOR C1, and again, so the point that it totally makes sense that there's in the drug addiction or in the drug abuse there's dysregulation because, in a sense, drug addiction is a dysregulated form of self-plasticity, right? Because they somehow keep doing that because their memory tells them that okay, so I need to do that. They have their plasticity is not being, is not being normal. Again, so given that how important is signaling in the plasticity, learning memory, so it's always makes sense. Yep. That's the question. Okay, so if you have any questions, you can probably